You gave them the excuse. That was the first thing Rachel Green said to me, and she said it loud enough that half the lobby of the Larkspur Arcade turned around. I had just come through the front doors with my laptop bag over one shoulder, still thinking about an elevator complaint on the fourth floor. It was one of those old Denver buildings with brass trim, cracked tile, and a lobby that always smelled like coffee, dust, and cold air from the street. Rachel stepped right in front of me before I reached the directory board. She was holding a folded notice in one hand. Her other hand was shaking, but not in a weak way. More like she was using every bit of control she had not to throw the paper at my face. "You're Eric Ramsey, right?" she said. "I am. Building risk consultant?" "That depends who's asking." "I'm asking," she snapped, "because my studio just got suspended over your report." People slowed down near the mailboxes. A man from the clock shop looked over his glasses. Two parents with kids in winter coats stood near the stairs, pretending not to listen. I kept my voice low. "What studio?" Her mouth opened a little, like she couldn't believe I had asked. "Green Workshop. Second floor. Sewing classes, costume repair, student projects. The place with actual people in it. That I knew. Not personally, but I had passed it before. Bright windows. Machines lined up in rows. Kids' paper patterns taped to the glass. It was the one space in the building that still looked like it was doing something real. "I didn't suspend anyone," I said. She laughed once, flat and sharp. "No, you just wrote the words they used." Then she shoved the notice against my chest. I took it because there was no graceful way not to. The top had the new management letterhead. Halden Asset Services. I had seen the name too many times that month. Clean font, clean logo, clean way of making old tenants feel messy. The notice said Green Workshop's instructional use was temporarily suspended due to enhanced operational load related to textile storage, costume materials, and class occupancy patterns. I stopped on that line, because it sounded like me. Not the suspension, not the order, but the phrase enhanced operational load had come from one of my summaries. I had written it in a narrow review about general building conditions. It was supposed to mean, check storage practices and keep records updated. It was not supposed to mean, shut down a room full of sewing machines. Rachel watched my face. "You recognize it," she said. "I recognize part of the language." "Great. So at least one of us knows what's happening." I kept reading. The next paragraph was worse. It jumped straight into suspension before giving her a normal cure period. It cited a private specialist clause instead of city process. The deadline was 48 hours. That made no sense. Even for a serious condition, the sequence was wrong. "Who delivered this?" I asked. "Brett Halden's assistant. In front of my students' parents." "When?" 20 minutes ago. I looked toward the elevators. "Did they inspect today?" "No. They walked past last week during class and took photos through the door." That bothered me even more. I folded the paper once and handed it back. "This isn't how this should work." Rachel stared at me. "You're telling me that now?" "I'm telling you because it's true." "No. You wrote something technical, gave it to people like Brett, and now tomorrow morning I have 12 beginner students who think their class is canceled because fabric bins are suddenly a building crisis." Her voice cracked on the last part, and she hated that it did. I could see it in how fast she looked away. I said, "Can I see your lease?" "No." "Then your renewal packet?" "No." "Insurance updates? Storage logs? Inspection records?" She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "Because this notice is using a shortcut it may not have the right to use. And if my memo is being used to support it, I need to know how." She studied me for a few seconds. I could feel everyone in the lobby waiting to see if she would tear into me again. Finally, she turned toward the stairs. "You get 10 minutes," she said. "And don't touch anything in my studio unless I say so." I followed her up to the second floor. Green Workshop was louder and warmer than the hall. Not loud in a bad way, just alive. Machines covered in cloth sleeves. Clear bins stacked by color. Half-finished jackets on forms. A rack of small costumes with name tags clipped to the hangers. Along one wall were thank you cards from families, theater groups, and women who had taken alteration classes there. A girl, maybe 16, was packing thread into a plastic case. She looked at Rachel and then at me. "Is he the guy?" she asked. Rachel dropped the notice on the cutting table. "He is currently the guy." "Great," the girl said. "Should I glare?" "Not yet, Sophie." Sophie glared anyway. Rachel pulled a binder from a shelf and opened it hard enough that the rings snapped. Lease. Insurance. Storage logs. Knock yourself out, consultant. I set my bag down slowly. I'm not here to defend them. You understand why I don't believe you. Yes. That answer seemed to irritate her because there was nowhere clean to push back. I started with the notice, then the lease, then the renewal packet from 8 months earlier. Most of it was normal old building language. Use restrictions, maintenance access, insurance certificates. Then I found the rider. It was tucked behind a page about after-hours entry. Same font, same footer, different language rhythm. That was usually how bad things hid. Not in bold, not in red. Just boring enough that tired people signed it. I read it twice. Rachel stood across from me with her arms crossed. What? This rider gives building-approved specialists authority to identify enhanced operational risks tied to tenant use. So that sounds mild. But paired with this notice, it lets them treat normal studio activity like a special violation. Faster timeline. Less outside review. Sophie leaned closer. In English. I tapped the page. They built a private lane around the normal process. Rachel's face changed. Not softer exactly. More focused. I signed that renewal, she said. I read it. I believe you. No, I read it. My mother taught me never to sign anything tired. Was this in the packet when you reviewed it? She hesitated. Sophie said. Lila handled the renewal packet, remember? She said management needed initials on the updated building forms. Rachel looked at her. That was routine. Maybe, Sophie said, quieter now. I took photos of the rider, the notice, and the signature page with Rachel's permission. Then I lined up the dates. My memo came after the rider. The rider came before the new asset manager started pushing inspections. The notice used my language, but the tool had already been set in place. That meant this was not a misunderstanding. It was a machine. Rachel watched me put the pages in order. Say it plainly. I looked at the fabric bins, the kids' projects, the machines waiting for morning class. They didn't shut you down because of fabric, I said. They built a rule that lets them call fabric a problem when they need your room. For the first time since the lobby, Rachel did not answer right away. Then Sophie, still standing by the shelf, said, Rachel. We both looked at her. She had another notice in her hand. Not Green Workshops. Older. Folded twice. This one's from Walter downstairs, she said. Same kind of wording. Rachel took it from her. And the anger in her face shifted into something heavier. Eric, she said, using my name like she had just decided I might be useful after all. How many tenants did they do this to? I looked back down at the rider. I don't know yet, I said, but I already knew one thing. Green Workshop was not the beginning. Sophie laid Walter's notice on the cutting table beside Rachel's, and for a few seconds nobody said anything. It had the same clean letterhead, same careful tone, same fake patience, different complaint. Public access obstruction. According to the notice, Walter's clock repair had created a corridor flow concern because of a glass display case near his front window. I had passed that case on the way in. It held old pocket watches, brass alarm clocks, and one tall wooden clock that had probably been in Denver longer than I had. It didn't block anything. You could roll a stroller past it without turning sideways. Rachel read it with both hands flat on the table. This is from 3 weeks ago, she said. Sophie nodded. He told me he was moving the case because management was being annoying. I didn't know they wrote him up. Did he sign anything? I asked. Sophie gave me a look. Walter signs birthday cards with a fountain pen. He probably has every paper since 1980. Rachel grabbed her keys. Then we go ask. I followed them back into the hall. This time Rachel didn't tell me to stay behind, but she didn't exactly invite me either. She moved fast, like if she slowed down she might have to think too much about what we had just found. Walter's shop was on the first floor, tucked beside the old mail alcove. A bell over the door gave a soft ring when we walked in. The room ticked from every direction. Wall clocks, table clocks, clocks with swinging brass pieces, clocks missing faces, clocks with little notes tied to their handles. Walter himself was behind the counter with a magnifier over one eye. Rachel, he said, looking up. You have that look. What look? The one your mother had when someone lied badly. Rachel held up the notice. Did they offer you money to leave after this? Walter took off the magnifier slowly. That was answer enough. He pulled a folder from under the counter. Inside were 2 letters. First the obstruction notice. Then a voluntary transition offer with a polite payment number and a line about confidentiality. I read the structure. Vague issue. Short deadline. Offer. Silence language. Move out date. Did they inspect the case? I asked. A young man came with a tablet, Walter said. Took pictures. Did not measure. Name. He shrugged. Badge said approved specialist. Very proud badge. Very cheap shoes. Sophie almost smiled. Rachel didn't. We went next to Salcedo dance room on the mezzanine. Olivia Salcedo was wiping mirrors when we came in. She had dancers stretching near the back, and the floor had tape marks for class spacing. Her notice said floor vibration transfer. It had arrived 4 days before renewal talks. My floor has been here 30 years, Olivia said, handing me her copy. Suddenly it shakes too much when rich people want the building quiet. Little Atlas Books had another one. Ventilation concern. The owner, Imran, kept language books in narrow stacks and children's picture dictionaries near the front. His shop smelled like paper and mint tea. He said Brett Halden had offered him a clean exit twice. The second offer came after the notice. The vent has worked badly since before I rented, Imran said. They used to say they would fix it. Now they say I am the problem. By the time we got back to Green Workshop, I had 4 notices, 3 offers, and 1 missing tenant. The print and sign shop at the end of the hall had already left. Sophie said the owner got buried in review costs and gave up. I stood at Rachel's cutting table and arranged the papers by date. Rachel watched from the other side, arms crossed tight. Sophie taped butcher paper to the wall and handed me a marker. You're mapping it? She asked. I'm trying to see if they were lazy. Rachel frowned. Lazy? People who build schemes like this usually reuse structure. Different words, same bones. I wrote each tenant name across the top. Green Workshop, fabric storage. Walter's clock repair, access obstruction. Salcedo dance room, vibration. Little Atlas Books, ventilation. Print and sign shop, legal review pressure. Then I wrote the sequence beneath each. Notice. Short deadline. Approved specialist. Settlement offer. Confidentiality. Vacancy. Sophie stood back. That's not even subtle. It isn't meant to be subtle to us, I said. It's meant to look separate to anyone who only reads one file. Rachel stared at the wall. They're clearing the building. I didn't answer right away. She turned to me. Say it. Yes, I said. They're clearing the building. Her face tightened, but she didn't fold. She moved to the window and looked down into the arcade. From there we could see the lobby, the old tiled floor, Walter's sign, the empty glass where the print shop used to be. I thought they just wanted me out, she said. I thought Green Workshop was too messy for their new brochure. It may be both. Sophie sat on a stool and opened Rachel's laptop. So who is the approved specialist? That's the next problem, I said. The specialist name on the notices was Front Range Operational Review. I knew most legitimate code consultants in Denver. That name didn't land anywhere in my head. Sophie searched it. The website was 1 page. Stock photo of a conference room. No staff names. No real address. Just a mail suite in Lakewood. I checked the registration history from records I already had access to through my work files. Front Range led to another company. That company led to a holding entity. The holding entity had the same registered agent as a vendor used by Halden Asset Services. Rachel leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I noticed the loose thread on her sleeve and the faint smell of machine oil from her hands. That points to Brett, she said. It points toward his operation, I said. Not enough alone. Consultant answer. Accurate answer. She looked at me, and for the first time there was no open anger in it. Just pressure. My phone rang before she could say more. The screen showed Brett Halden. Rachel saw the name. Sophie saw the name. Even Walter, who had come upstairs with his folder and was now standing near the door, saw the name. I answered on speaker without thinking too long. Eric, Brett said, smooth as glass. I hear you've been spending time with tenants. Rachel's eyes narrowed. I'm reviewing how my memo is being used, I said. I'd keep that narrow. That's harder when my language appears in enforcement notices I didn't issue. A small pause. Then Brett chuckled. Old buildings create emotional reactions. You know that better than anyone. We need clean, professional closeout here. Send me a short note confirming your original concern, no extra commentary, and I'll make sure you're taken care of on the back end. Sophie mouthed, wow. I said, taken care of how? Don't make me say clumsy things on the phone, Brett replied. A clean closeout bonus. Call it priority review compensation. Everybody stays in their lane. Rachel's stare landed on me like a test. I felt the old version of myself, the one from the big firm, the one that knew how to step back and use phrases like limited scope. That version would have ended the call and written a careful email that protected nobody except me. But I was looking at a wall full of tenants' names. I'm not confirming something I don't believe, I said. Brett's voice cooled. Be careful, Eric. Independence is expensive when clients stop calling. The line went dead. For a moment, the only sound was the sewing machine in the back, still clicking because one of Sophie's students had left it on low. Rachel reached over and switched it off. You didn't have to put him on speaker, she said. No, but you did. Yes. She nodded once, like she was filing that away somewhere. Sophie was still digging through boxes near the storage wall while we talked. She had been restless since we came back, pulling old class rosters, donation letters, anything with the building name on it. Then we heard a scrape. Rachel, Sophie called. We turned. She was crouched behind a rolling costume rack, tugging at the edge of a narrow cabinet built into the wall. I had not noticed it before because fabric bolts were stacked in front of it. There's a lock back here, Sophie said. Old one. Rachel came over slowly. That was my mom's supply cabinet. You have a key? Rachel opened a drawer beneath the thread shelf and took out a ring with half a dozen old keys. She tried 3 before one turned. The cabinet opened with a dry wooden sound. Inside were binders wrapped in plastic, a metal cash box, old photos of the arcade, and envelopes labeled in handwriting that had to belong to Rachel's mother. Rachel pulled one binder out and set it on the table like it might break. The first page said, Larkspur Arcade Cultural Use Agreements. I looked at the date. Older than Rachel's current lease. Older than Brett. Older than the management company. Walter came closer. I remember those. Rachel turned a page. Her face changed as she read. There were letters from the original building administrator. Tenant protection language. Notes about arts, repair, education, and community makerspaces being part of the building's identity. Not casual renters. Protected uses. Sophie whispered, They buried this. Rachel touched one of the letters with 2 fingers. My mother kept everything, she said. I looked from the old agreement to the notices on the wall. Now the pattern made full sense. They weren't just removing tenants because the rooms were useful. They were removing the proof that those tenants belonged there. Rachel looked up at me, and this time she didn't look like she hated me. She looked like she needed to know whether I would stay when the room got harder. I said, We need copies of all of this. She nodded. Then we make sure Brett knows he picked the wrong building. By the next morning, Rachel had stopped acting like someone trying to save one studio. She came in with coffee, 2 extra phone chargers, a roll of blue painter's tape, and a list of people to call. Parents, donors, theater clients. Every tenant who had received one of those clean little notices from Brett Halden's office. Sophie was already at the front table with 3 binders open. I made folders, she said. Rachel looked at the labels. You made them angry. I made them accurate. The labels said, Fake process, tenant pattern, old agreements, Brett money trail. I almost smiled. Try not to write that on anything we hand to a hearing officer. Sophie capped the marker. Fine. I'll write it emotionally smaller. Rachel had planned the student costume showcase weeks before any of this happened. It was supposed to be simple. Kids walking through the arcade atrium in costumes they had made themselves. Some scholarship students showing alterations. A few local theater people coming by to support the studio. Nothing fancy. But after the notice, the showcase had become proof that Green Workshop was still standing. Parents kept calling. Are we still coming? Is class safe? Do the kids bring costumes? Is management going to stop us? Rachel answered every call the same way. Yes. Come. Bring the costume. Bring whoever was planning to cheer. She sounded strong on the phone, but I saw her hand grip the table after the 3rd parent asked whether the building might cancel everything at the door. At noon, I went down to the county records office, then back to my old firm's online portal while I still had access. I wasn't proud of using a login I knew might be cut off any minute, but I also wasn't stealing secrets. I was looking for the piece everyone kept pretending did not exist. I found it in a financing attachment labeled Delivery Condition Summary. One line. Legacy cultural tenants to be cleared prior to transfer for enhanced value schedule. Then a side reference tied to Brett's performance compensation. Not a normal fee. Not a regular salary line. A private payout if the building was delivered clean before the sale closed. I sat in my truck for a minute with the laptop open and my hands still on the keyboard. That was the answer to who benefited. Brett wasn't just managing pressure. He was getting paid for making people disappear from the floor plan. My phone rang before I could call Rachel. It was my director from the firm, Mitchell. I answered. Eric, he said, you need to step away from Larkspur. No. There was a pause. Mitchell wasn't used to hearing that from me. I had always been reliable, quiet, useful. You are outside scope, he said. Our client requested a building risk summary, not tenant advocacy. They used my language in suspension notices. And you should let counsel handle that. Did we know about the cultural use agreements? He didn't answer fast enough. That was enough. I leaned back in the seat and looked across the street at the old arcade windows. You knew, I said. We knew there were legacy use complications. That's not the same thing. Did we know the specialist clause could be used to speed up removals? Eric, answer me. His voice lowered. This is why scope exists. It protects the firm. It protects you. No, I said. It protects the client when the facts get ugly. Mitchell sighed like I was being young and dramatic, even though I was 35 and tired. You are putting your position at risk. My position already did damage. Be careful. I looked at the delivery summary again. I resign, I said. Another long pause. Don't do this over emotion. I'm doing it over documents. I ended the call before he could give me a cleaner sentence to hide behind. When I got back to Green Workshop, Rachel was near the costume rack, helping a boy pin cardboard wings onto a jacket. She looked up and knew something had changed before I said anything. What happened? I resigned. She froze. The boy looked between us, confused. Rachel told him gently, go ask Sophie for the silver trim. When he walked away, she lowered her voice. Eric, they knew enough to stay away from the dirty parts. You don't have to burn your career for my studio. I'm not doing it for your studio. That came out wrong, and her face closed a little. I corrected myself. I mean not only your studio. This is bigger. She looked down, then nodded. I know, she said. That's what scares me. I showed her the delivery summary and the payout reference. She read both twice. So Brett gets paid if we're gone. Yes. And Lila helped him. I hadn't said that part yet. Sophie had. She came out from behind the front desk holding a printout and looking like she wanted to throw up. I checked the access logs, she said. For the storage room, after-hours entry, management shared folder. Lila's credentials were used 6 times after she left. Rachel stared at the paper. Lila Mayberry had been Rachel's operations coordinator for almost 3 years. I knew that much from the files. She had handled schedules, rental forms, parent emails, supply orders, renewal packets. Rachel had trusted her with everything boring and important. Sophie set the printout down. There are emails too, she said. Forwarded class schedules. Storage maps. Showcase setup details. She sent Brett which night the kids would have costumes in the hallway. Rachel didn't move. For once, she didn't get loud. That was worse. She knew those families, Rachel said quietly. She knew which students were on scholarship. She knew why Thursday nights mattered. Sophie wiped her cheek fast and pretended she hadn't. She was promised a job, I said. Hotel project. Creative retail experience. Rachel gave a small, cold laugh. That's what they're calling it. Nobody answered. At 4:30, the hallway started filling with parents carrying garment bags and kids with face paint kits. Walter brought a box of folding rulers. Olivia Salcido came with 2 dancers and a rolling mirror. Imran from Little Atlas had a stack of chairs he said were technically bookstore furniture, emotionally public seating. For about 20 minutes, it almost felt like the showcase might happen without another hit. Then the elevator opened. 2 building security guards stepped out with a locksmith, replacement cylinders, and a clipboard. Brett wasn't with them. Of course he wasn't. Brett sent other people to touch the door. The lead guard cleared his throat. Green Workshop is under temporary suspension. We have instructions to secure the suite and adjacent storage wing. Rachel walked into the hallway. Parents went quiet. A little girl in a half-finished dragon costume stepped behind her father. I moved beside Rachel, but not in front of her. The guard looked at me. Sir, this is building business. It is now under pending review, I said. He looked at the clipboard. We have an emergency notice. Based on fabric hazard and blocked egress. He blinked. Yes. I handed him a packet. You also have related party inspection conflict, disputed authority under the rider, lender notice, and pending emergency relief. He didn't take it at first. Rachel turned to the parents and tenants. Her voice carried down the hall. Everyone, please stay where you are. Don't block the stairs. Don't crowd the door. Just watch. Then she faced the guard again. This studio is open, she said. If you want to remove us, do it in front of the people you're hurting. The locksmith shifted his weight. He looked like he had expected an empty hallway, not kids in costumes and Walter holding a clock repair case like a briefcase. The guard stepped away and called upstairs. We waited. Nobody spoke much. A boy's cardboard wings rustled. Somewhere behind us, Olivia told her dancers to stand tall. Rachel kept her eyes on the guard, but her hand brushed mine once, quick and tense, like she needed to know I was still there. I turned my hand just enough that our fingers touched. She didn't pull away. The guard came back after 2 minutes. We're instructed to hold position, he said. Meaning? Rachel asked. No lock change at this time. Sophie let out a breath so loud half the hallway heard it. The parents started talking all at once. Imran began setting chairs against the wall. Walter checked his watch and said, Showcase is now only 11 minutes behind, which for artists is early. A few people laughed. Rachel didn't. Not yet. She looked at me, and I could see the fear under everything. Not fear of Brett exactly. Fear that winning one hallway moment would make him come harder in a better room. He'll try to make us look messy, she said. Yes. He'll make you look bitter. Probably. He'll make me look emotional. I glanced at the open studio door, the students, the binders, the parents, the old agreements copied and stacked. Then we bring documents and witnesses, I said, and we let him be polished. Rachel nodded slowly. The showcase did not happen that night. Not properly. Parents stayed, kids tried on costumes, and everyone ate grocery store cookies in the hallway while Sophie made a witness list on the back of a class flyer. By 9, Green Workshop looked less like a studio and more like a command center. Rachel stood at the table, sorting her mother's letters into plastic sleeves. I was across from her, building the hearing packet. She slid one page toward me, then looked at my empty left hand resting near the folder. For a second, she covered it with hers. Not dramatic, not soft, just there. I really did hate you in the lobby, she said. I know. I'm not all the way done being mad. That's fair. But you stayed. I looked at our hands, then at the files between us. Yeah, I said. I did. She squeezed once and let go. Outside the windows, the arcade lights flickered on over the empty atrium. Tomorrow Brett would get his polished room, and we would bring the building he had tried to erase. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. For some reason, I had pictured dark wood, high ceilings, something that made everyone feel official. Instead, it was a plain conference room in a city office building with gray carpet, bad coffee, and a wall clock that clicked too loudly. Brett Halden arrived in a navy suit with one folder and 2 lawyers. Rachel arrived with Sophie, Walter, Olivia, Imran, 3 binders, 1 rolling file card, and a look on her face that made even the security guard outside move politely out of her way. I came in last. No firm badge. No company laptop. No one paying me to stay narrow. Just my own notes, my own name, and the evidence Brett thought he had buried in boring language. He glanced at me once and smiled like we were both men at a private club, and he was sad I had forgotten the rules. The hearing officer, a woman named Gianna, opened the session by asking why an emergency lockout had been attempted before normal review. Brett stood first. He was good. I'll give him that. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound greedy. He sounded concerned. He said the Larkspur Arcade was undergoing a responsible transition. He said management had identified elevated operational concerns among certain tenants. He said Green Workshop had been emotional, resistant, and unwilling to comply with reasonable requests. Then he turned slightly toward me. And Mr. Ramsey, he said, while previously a technical consultant on related building matters, is now a former consultant with a personal dispute against his prior firm and our office. Rachel shifted beside me. I stayed still. Gianna looked at me. Mr. Ramsey? I opened the first binder. I wrote a limited building risk summary, I said. It did not recommend tenant suspension. It did not authorize lockout. It did not identify Green Workshop as an emergency condition. The language from that summary was later inserted into enforcement notices through a private rider that bypassed ordinary review. Brett's lawyer started to object, but Gianna lifted one hand. Let him finish. So I did. I laid it out clean. The rider hidden in renewal packets. The approved specialist clause. Front range operational review. The shell links. The repeated notice structure. Different excuse, same sequence. Fabric storage for Rachel. Access obstruction for Walter. Vibration for Salcedo Dance. Ventilation for Little Atlas Books. Review cost pressure for the print shop that had already left. I didn't call it a scheme at first. I just showed the pattern until the room got quiet enough for everyone to see it without me naming it. Then I placed the delivery condition summary on the table. Legacy cultural tenants to be cleared prior to transfer. I read. Brett's smile went away. I added the payout reference. This ties Mr. Halden's private compensation to clean delivery before closing. One of the lawyers leaned toward Brett and whispered fast. Gianna turned to Brett. Is this document authentic? Brett adjusted his cuff. That document is being taken out of commercial context. Rachel whispered, there it is. Sophie went next. She was nervous for about 10 seconds, then she got mad enough to speak clearly. She showed the access logs. Lila Mayberry using old credentials after leaving Green Workshop. Shared folders opened at night. Storage maps downloaded. Student schedule files forwarded to management. She knew when children would be in the hallway, Sophie said, voice tight. She knew which storage areas would look fullest before the showcase. Those details were used to create the lockout notice. Gianna asked, where is Ms. Mayberry? Brett's lawyer said they had not been able to reach her. Sophie looked straight at Brett. That's convenient. Rachel touched her arm under the table, just once, to calm her. Then it was Rachel's turn. She didn't start with feelings. I think Brett expected her to. He had built his whole room around making her sound emotional. Instead, she opened one of her mother's binders. My mother rented space in the Larkspur Arcade before I did, she said. She kept sewing machines alive when this building had more empty rooms than tenants. She taught alterations here. She repaired costumes here. And she kept these. She handed over the cultural use agreements. Old letters. Original tenant identity language. Written commitments to arts, repair, teaching, and maker spaces. A history that had not been decorative. It had been part of how the building received support, attention, and public goodwill. Walter spoke next. Then Olivia. Then Imran. The retired building administrator, Mr. Galloway, came in with a cane and a folder so old the corners were soft. I signed some of those letters, he said. Those tenants were not leftovers. They were the reason the arcade survived the bad years. That changed the room. You could feel it. Brett had come prepared to argue about bins, doorways, vents, and vibration. Now he had to argue against memory, paper, and a line of tenants who had receipts. Gianna called a break. In the hallway, Brett passed close to Rachel. This could still be simple, he said quietly. You can get relief for your studio. Don't make yourself responsible for everyone. Rachel looked at him for a long second. A month earlier, maybe she would have taken that. Not because she was selfish, but because saving one living thing already costs enough. But she turned and looked down the hall at Walter, Olivia, Imran, Sophie, and me. Then she faced Brett again. That's the difference between you and me, she said. You keep thinking the room is the prize. Write in the comments. Would you fight for the whole building like Rachel did? Or would you protect your own studio first and let everyone else handle their own battle? After the break, Gianna asked Rachel what remedy she was requesting. Brett sat back, ready for her to ask for Green Workshop to reopen. Rachel stood. I'm asking that emergency protection cover all legacy community tenants named in the cultural use agreements, she said. I'm asking that the private specialist process be frozen. I'm asking that no tenant be pushed through technical notices tied to the redevelopment until the full record is reviewed. Brett's lawyer rose fast. Gianna let him talk, then granted the temporary protections anyway. Not everything. Not a perfect ending in one afternoon. Real life rarely hands you that. But enough. No lockout. No fast removal. No private enforcement shortcut. Redevelopment activity frozen pending broader review. Specialist chain under scrutiny. Settlement pressure pulled into the record. Brett left before anyone else. Lila's name stayed behind in the paperwork. By the next week, the sale was wobbling. By the next month, it stalled. And the tenants did something smarter than simply going back to how things were. They formed the Larkspur Maker and Arts Cooperative Floor. That was Rachel's name, though she pretended she hated naming things. They created shared storage standards so nobody could turn a messy shelf into a weapon. They built a tenant council with direct review rights over future use changes. They pooled money for legal help. Walter kept minutes in perfect handwriting. Imran made translated notices. Olivia hosted meetings in the dance room when the studio tables were full. I opened my own small forensic advisory practice 2 blocks away, in a room above a bike shop with one window and a heater that clanked at night. My first clients were not rich. They were daycare centers, small theaters, churches, repair shops, and community rooms that needed someone to read the boring language before it got used against them. Rachel sent me my first referral, then my second. Then she started showing up with coffee and pretending it was because her copier was better than mine. The delayed showcase happened 6 weeks after the hallway lockout. They held it in the restored arcade atrium, under the old glass ceiling, with lights strung between the railings. Nothing matched perfectly. Some chairs were borrowed from Little Atlas books. Salcedo Dance brought portable mirrors. Walter fixed the stage timer when it stuck at 7 minutes. Sophie ran around with pins in her sleeve and a headset that was not connected to anything. The kids walked out in handmade costumes like they were entering the biggest stage in Colorado. A fox with uneven ears. A cardboard astronaut. A blue velvet jacket with silver trim. A dragon whose wings had survived 3 repairs and 1 spilled lemonade. Parents clapped like every stitch mattered, because it did. I stood near the back, beside a column, where I could see everything without getting in the way. Rachel found me before the final group went on. She wore black pants, a white shirt, and a measuring tape around her neck like she had forgotten it was there. Her hair was pinned up badly, and there was a thread stuck to her cheek. "You hiding back here?" she asked. "Observing." "Consultant answer." "Former consultant answer." She smiled a little and looked toward the kids lining up near the stairs. "I really did hate you in the lobby," she said. "Fair." She stepped closer. "Then you made it expensive to trust you." I looked at her hand before I took it. Not because I wasn't sure, because I understood what it meant. Her fingers closed around mine. No big speech. No dramatic promise. Just her hand in mine while the arcade filled with noise, light, and people Brett had tried to turn into vacancies. The timer bell rang exactly on time. Walter raised one thumb from across the atrium. Rachel laughed under her breath, and the final group of students walked out. I watched them, then watched her watching them. For years, I had treated buildings like problems to be measured. Loads, exits, reports, clauses, risks. I still believed in all that. Details mattered. Procedure mattered. Words mattered. But standing there beside Rachel, with the studio alive and the whole arcade full again, I understood something I should have learned earlier. The future was not just a risk calculation. Sometimes it was the thing you chose when choosing it cost you something.